Welcome to episode 55 of Real Health Radio. You can find the links talked about as part of this episode at the show notes, which is www.7, all spelled out, so SEVEN, health.com/55.
Welcome to Real Health Radio. Health advice that's more than just about how you look. And here's your host, Chris Sandel.
Hey boys and girls, and welcome to another episode of Real Health Radio. I'm your host, Chris Sandel, and on today's show, it's another one where I'm sitting down with a guest. Today's guest is Uhrich. Lou is a certified eating psychology coach and a body image mentor who specializes in helping women to overcome their struggles with yo-yo dieting, with food restriction, with binge eating, with shame, body hate, and other unwanted mindsets and behaviors. Through her one-on-one coaching programs and online courses, she guides clients to end the exhausting hustle for food and body perfection by finding out who they really are, what they truly want, and how to finally get it. And you can find more information at her site, which is www.lueats.com, so L-U-eats.com. So I first became aware of Lou when she reached out to me earlier in the year. I shared a story of my girlfriend's ectopic pregnancy very early on in the year, and she sent me a really lovely and supportive email, which was very sweet. More recently, I heard her being interviewed on Maddie Moon's podcast and just really enjoyed what she had to say. She sounded very genuine, very sane, and someone who had had a real ton of life experience that she could then bring into this work outside of just going through her own struggles with food. And also through listening to the podcast, I got the real impression from hearing her, and this is something that I actually mentioned to her in the email when I first got in contact, that she had fully recovered and that she was no longer dealing with like her food and with body issues. And there are times when I listen to interviews with eating coaches who have struggled with food, and often the feeling I get is that there is still some work to be done. And I get that we are all like work in progresses. I get that we all have our own stuff that we are working on. But with Lou, when I was listening to her interviewed, I clearly had the sense that she was in a really great place and she genuinely knew how to guide other people to get there. So as part of the show today, we talk about her own food struggles, her own struggles with body image and what they were really about, because as always, it isn't actually about the food, it isn't actually about the weight. She talks about how she's been a real advocate for the marginalized and how this has always been so important for her, and now taking on the role that she does, very much fighting for the rights of body positivity and for all bodies and all of that. We cover binge eating and part of the reason it happens and what people should be doing afterwards if it does occur. And we also then look at how what we see and the pictures we see, the TV shows, the magazines, all of that, and the images of particular body shapes and body sizes can affect our preferences, whether it be for thinness or fatness, depending on what we see. Lou was like an absolute fantastic guest, and I loved having her on the show. So without further ado, here is the interview. Hey Lou, welcome to the show. It's great to have you joining me.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you so much for having me.
So you are a coach. You help women to make peace with like food, with their body, and essentially get off the diet roller coaster. What was the path that led you to do this kind of work?
Well, the path that led me to this kind of work was obviously my own personal experience. To make my history short, I lived a really normal life in terms of the way I viewed food and my body, or maybe it was abnormal because as a girl growing up, as a teenager and as a young woman, I never had issues with my body. It wasn't something that I really focused on at all.
Yeah.
Same with food. I didn't restrict it. I never looked at food and thought, well, I wonder what this will do to my body, either in a make it smaller sort of way, make it healthier or unhealthier sort of way, make it, larger. I never looked at food and thought, this right here has the power to change the shape or size or figure of me. I just liked it, so I ate it.
Yeah.
And that was the message that was sent in my family all growing up. We never talked about food in terms of how it would affect your body, how it would manipulate your body. We had a wide range of foods. So I have kids, and the way that we use the terms in our home is we have the fun foods, which means that some fun foods are nutritious, and some fun foods are just fun for your taste buds, for the experience, for the moment, celebration.
Yeah.
But they don't necessarily have to have this nourishing value in terms of micronutrients and macronutrients. It can just be nourishing in terms of pleasure and celebration and community. And so those are like the fun foods. And so as a kid, I had a wide range of fun foods, but we also had a lot of everyday foods, what we call them in my home today with my kids. We call them everyday foods. So they're the foods that you could eat all the time that really help your body to feel and function best, to give you energy, things like that. So my grandparents had a garden. They lived next door. We had a lot of farm to table sort of foods. And so that's how I lived, was having a mix of like these, I'm from a Mennonite background. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Mennonites.
I know of them very briefly from a podcast that was just done with revisionist history, where he was talking about something that happened with Mennonites. But no, I know very little about them.
Okay, well, similar to the Amish, not quite as old ordered, but similar to the Amish, and there's a lot of like Pennsylvania Dutch cooking and this decadent, lots of fat, lots of flour, lots of sugar. And so I grew up around all that too. Yep. That's where I'm from. And we looked at everything as having some sort of value. And so I ate, like I said, a wide range of foods. I moved my body in ways that I enjoyed. I mean, to walk around my block as a child was 2.5 miles. That was one block.
Okay.
So we were used to moving and eating, but not in a way where we looked at how it would manipulate our bodies. And so I grew up never having those thoughts, never having those ideas. And it wasn't until long after I had gone through puberty and a lot of changes there that so many women start wanting to manipulate their body size or their weight or getting uncomfortable with changes. It wasn't until after I went through college and the new food and having 24/7 access to the cafeteria and a lot of, foods that are mass produced.
Yeah.
And then after even getting married and going through all of that without doing like the bridal boot camps or whatever, all of that had passed me by before I even once thought about doing a fitness program or a diet. And if I knew what I knew now, I never would have signed up for that.
Yeah.
But I did it to support my husband. Again, if I knew what I knew now when his doctors recommended, maybe you want to lose a little bit of weight to help your autoimmune condition, I would have questioned that. Yeah. Because I don't believe that weight and those sort of health issues, or very many health issues at all, have that causative effect. Yeah. Maybe there's a correlation, but I don't think that the weight, and I know now the weight wasn't what was causing his issues, but I did it to support him actually in pursuing better health. But what happened was it wreaked havoc on my health, because all of a sudden I started counting calories and restricting my food, depriving myself. And I mean, I went from eating whatever, whenever I wanted to, which was a very healthy balance, just naturally. But I went from eating whatever, whenever I wanted to being very strict down to like the amount of dressing I put on a salad or how much creamer I put into coffee, like measuring it all, regulating it all, because there was this plan that I was following that I had to stick to. And not only was it about calories, but it was about micronutrients and macronutrients and carbs and fats, exactly how much I could have. And so I got really strict. And then on top of it, I started doing rigorous exercise, which I had never really done before. Like I would walk. I had run a half marathon before, so I would run sometimes, but never in a way where it was like, I have to do this, and this is to manipulate my body or change my physique. So this just got extreme for me. And I know with some women it's like that. It just takes one diet, one extreme fitness program to actually change your body chemistry and your physiology. And that's what happened to me. So after 3 months, my husband was like, all right, that was fun. And I was like a wreck. Like I had lost my period. I had lost weight I didn't need to lose. I had been at the same set point weight probably since I was 13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I had dropped 15 pounds and had lost a lot of normal bodily functions, lost my libido. My hormones were all over the place. I had thyroid dysfunction. There was so much going on with me, but I couldn't stop. So I continued to restrict. And as most people know who diet, eventually your body starts holding on to weight. It starts trying to fight back against these really drastic low amounts of calories and high amounts of energy you're putting out.
Yeah.
And so my metabolism slowed, and I knew I had to diet more and eat less calories and work out harder to have the same drops in weight that I was experiencing in the first 3 months. And so then the pendulum swung the other way, and I started binge eating because I couldn't keep up with the rigors of a diet where I was eating next to nothing and then working out, and my body was just so starved for nutrients and in complete shock, I think.
Yeah.
So then I went to extreme binge eating and cycled between the two, between restricting and binging for years before I really realized, like, I have a problem. It's not getting better. I had listened to podcasts. I had read all the blogs. I was studying as much as I could from people about how to recover from binge eating or how to get back to peace with food. But it wasn't until I personally hired a coach and worked with her that I healed my relationship with food and body, but ultimately my relationship with myself. And I think that's what I discovered with her, was that there was a lot of life that I was using food and body to numb, to forget about.
Yeah.
I was using those things to comfort me, to distract me from where I was actually uncomfortable or unhappy in life. And so working on my life also helped to fix my relationship with food and body. So it was multifaceted. It was all three of those things, life, food, and body, that she worked with me on. And after working with her and truly reaching a recovery where I felt really comfortable in my skin again, even more comfortable than I ever had before.
Yeah.
Because I think really what happened is I took my body and food for granted all growing up. Like, it wasn't an issue, but it also wasn't something I really respected or knew deeply. And the same with food. Food wasn't an issue, but I didn't respect it. I didn't learn a lot about it. I didn't really pay attention to how it affected me. Yeah. And so now, after working with this coach and continuing for years to do the work that I do, I feel at an even better place than even before any of this dieting and binge cycling started, because I really love and respect my body. I have a relationship with it where before I just took it for granted. And I love and respect food too. And yeah, it's just an amazing place to be. So all of that coupled with the fact that, like I mentioned before, I'm a mama. I have 3 kids, and I was staying at home with them, but they're all of school age now. I knew I wanted to do something with my time and something that gave back. And I thought, wow, this is the perfect opportunity. So I was mentored. I was certified in eating psychology and mind-body nutrition and opened my practice. And now I coach women.
Okay. So that, I mean, there is so much that I want to chat about as part of that. And before doing this interview with you, I was reading your bio on your website when you were describing the first diet and how it got started. And you said, it seemed like a great way to support my husband in his fitness journey, to distract myself from an ongoing medical crisis, to improve my own health, and to try for 6-pack abs. So for me, the thing that really jumps out as part of that is to distract myself from an ongoing medical crisis. And while I don't know about your specific situation or recovery, I would imagine that dealing with that part of it was probably a big part, because people often use obsessiveness around food or wanting to control their body as a way of trying to control other areas of their life that are uncontrollable. And so you don't have to go into any amount of detail or share personal information, but would you say that this was part of the goal when you were trying to control all of that stuff, like trying to control things that were uncontrollable in other areas of your life? Yeah,
well, I'm an open book, if you can't tell yet, from my writing and from the other podcasts I've done. Like, I'm fine just letting it all out there. I'm really comfortable. And so is my family, because the medical condition actually wasn't my personal medical crisis. My husband was suffering from an autoimmune condition, a very rare one, autoimmune pancreatitis.
Okay.
And it's super rare. It affects the pancreas. They thought he had pancreatic cancer. I mean, we were at the best pancreatic cancer clinic in the United States with all these other patients who had 4 to 5 months to live. And they still were unsure what this huge mass was in my husband's pancreas. So yeah, I thought I was going to be a widow in my 20s, and we had kids. And then we also have a daughter who has special needs, and she had some heart defects associated with the genetic condition that she has. And so I know that at that time, I really felt like I had to hold my whole family together. Yep. I was being my husband's medical advocate. I was being my daughter's medical advocate. There was so much extra pressure on me and on my life that I really do think that I used this fitness program to focus my energy somewhere else, to find something that I could control and could, feel like I was actually productive in doing, because I felt completely out of control in helping the two of the most important people in my life walk through a really tough struggle for themselves in terms of their health.
Yeah. Which also then links into, you did a really great article back in April where you talked that early this year you were experiencing some anxiety for a number of weeks. You mentioned that you tried lots of different self-care options and not really getting much help with that. And in the end, you actually were helped by just like sitting with the discomfort and asking yourself what this was really about. And you were then able to discover what it was about and able to then chat with families and friends and like get through it. And I think this piece of advice is really powerful for a couple of reasons. Like, one is that we should feel discomfort in our lives. Like, it is a part and parcel of the human experience. And we normally have this knee-jerk reaction to just take it away, not to understand why it's happening, but to just want to make it stop. And that people need to really understand that that is what life is like, that it is messy, and that if those things are happening, it's not because you're doing it wrong. And I feel that for a lot of people, they need to come to terms with a lot of these issues, that often when these are coming up, it's I need to solve this, and it's often I need to solve this through my food or through body. And really, they need to be able to be much more comfortable with sitting with uncertainty or vulnerability or whatever. And I imagine that this is probably something that you had to work on through your process, and also is something that you work on a lot with clients.
Oh yeah, we work on this all the time. And if I knew now what I knew then, or okay, let's flip that around. If I knew then what I knew now, I definitely wouldn't have chosen the fitness program and the trying to get a six-pack abs and severely restricting my calories as a means of getting through a tough time, for sure. And that's why I wrote the post that I did back in April, is because I was having just really extreme anxiety. And it's pretty normal. People have these often. They're called anniversary reactions. So you go through a really traumatic experience in your life, and sure enough, around the same time, the same season, you'll start experiencing some of those anxiety pangs again, some of those worries, even physical symptoms, which is what was happening to me. And I tried every tool in the book that I have, and the things that I offer my clients in terms of practical guidance. To feel better, amp up your self-care, do the things that you really enjoy, take more time to get out in nature, get grounded, walk around with your bare feet, breathe in the fresh air, have a massage, like all the things that I would recommend. And none of those helped. And the only thing that actually eventually helped me to work through this anxiety and move past it, like you discussed, was sitting through it, was really addressing where I hadn't let it go, where I needed to extend forgiveness, where I needed to extend, just grace and compassion to myself of like, wow, that was really hard. And you didn't process through it then. And so, I find with my clients quite often, their food and body issues aren't ever really about food and body. They're just symptoms of other underlying issues. And a lot of those issues do come down to experiences they've had in their family, or feeling unhappy with their jobs and their lives right now, being unfulfilled in relationships, so many things where we actually really need to do the work around being self-aware and helping them go after what they want. So I often say, like, I help people find out what they want and then find out how to go get it. And in doing so, the food and body issues fall away. Sure, there's some practical things we still need to get through on that side, But the big issue is more their life, because once you're living a full life, a life that feels fulfilling and fun to you, you're not going to be so, consumed and so overwhelmed and hyper-focused on the way your body looks while you're living this life that you love, or what you're eating while you're living this life that you love.
Yeah, definitely. And I think food is often used as that substitute because people aren't getting the things that they really need or really desire for the fear of putting themselves out there or whatever it may be. And look, when I was reading that piece, I'm currently reading Brene Brown's Rising Strong, and I found that there were a lot of similarities in terms of the way you were talking about sitting with the discomfort and starting to do the deeper work about what's going on that she talks about in that book as well. So how has going through the experience that you went through changed your thoughts around like food or body image or body diversity? Like, were these things that you'd thought about before? Were you like someone who would always like champion body respect for all shapes and sizes, or were you more oblivious to this stuff because you just had no reason to really think about it so much?
I will say I've always been someone who advocates for the marginalized and who seeks justice. I'm a big justice seeker. I like reform and revolution. Like, that just lights me up. And so I will say that even before I really dove into body positivity and body diversity, health at every size, I didn't know all the science behind it. I didn't know how big, I know it's still relatively small when we look at our world, but how big the community is of body positive activists and voices. But I will say I have always really championed human beings, like just people. Like, we're all so beautiful, so special, so unique. And that's always intrigued me. I love hearing people's stories and getting to know what makes them who they are. And I've often found myself, I've walked out of dinners before or, been really upset with people, had fights with family over the comments that they've made about people's body size, about skin color, about their lifestyle choices or their sexuality, any of those things. Like, I'm definitely the person who's like, no, these are people and they deserve love and respect. And so I will say I've always had that in me. It's just like this fire that's been in me for as long as I've been born, my parents would say, and continues to this day. Yeah. But it definitely was lit and fanned into a big flame once I walked through what I went through with my own eating and weight stuff, and realized, wow, like, I've been privileged always to be in a thin body. Like, I have thin privilege for sure. I've had the same set point weight. Like I said, besides the several years that I struggled with restrict binge cycling and went up and down around that set point, around 15 pounds. So I had a 30-pound weight range for sure. But back at my set point now, have always been at this set point weight for as long as I've stopped growing, as a kid, and felt fine in this body and been privileged to be thin. But once I saw, like, wow, some of these reasons I wanted to manipulate my body and manipulate food wasn't because I'm in a fat body, wasn't because I'm one of the people who is stigmatized, but because there's this underlying fear that I would be if I got fat. If the binge eating got so out of control that my weight skyrocketed, then what? I'm going to be the person who's stigmatized, judged. Like, I think Isabel Fox and Duke is the one who said it, but it's along the lines of talking about thin privilege and why thin women should care about fat positivity and fat activism. And she says, because either, we are fat and we're dealing with the discrimination of that, or we're thin and we're trying to always prevent us from feeling it and receiving it. And
from grace.
Yeah. And I wholeheartedly, agree with that. And so I think my own experience kind of opened my eyes to this idea of like, wow, like, look at all the cultural messaging that says that thin is the only way to be. And before I would say that side of it, I was oblivious to. Okay. So while I always had a heart for the marginalized, I don't think I realized how culturally pervasive this idea of thin is holy, better, beautiful. I just never understood like how broad and how severe that was.
Okay. And just going back to your situation and when you were going through it, did family and friends like know that you were struggling, or were you being told like like you're doing something healthy and you're being praised for it, like what, how do people react?
So what's interesting, I said, growing up, really, my family didn't talk much about bodies or much about food. And so the same thing sort of happened when I went down this track of eating less and working out more. My body size definitely changed. My pants were falling off. I got a lot smaller. My husband noticed right away.
Yeah.
He didn't notice it was a problem, until, he said one day he noticed that my pants were falling off and was like, wow, I don't know that that's healthy. It's only been 3 months, but then after that, he was done with the program. So he assumed that of me too. And I kept a lot of my restriction and binging a secret while he was at work. Okay. And I was at home with the kids. So you hear a lot about women who binge eat at night. And that was not me. Like I was like binge eating in the middle of the morning, in the afternoon, because it was about being in secret, really. And my kids were never going to tell. and so anyway, that was my story. I didn't tell him for a while. Eventually, he's my best friend. I opened up to him and said, look, I'm really struggling here. He didn't quite know how to help me, but he tried his best. And I've mentioned in other interviews, he was the one who was all over getting a coach for me. There was no price too high, nothing too outrageous for him to say, just get the help you need, because I want you to be healthy in your mind and in your body, and I want you to take care of yourself. And that was his way of taking care of me, was trying to find the help that I needed. So he was definitely supportive. He noticed, but he didn't know how to help me. The rest of my family they just really didn't notice. Since obviously I do this work, my story is very public. My family, my dad has come to me and apologized and been like, wow, I didn't know. It's hard to know when to say something and when not. And I wasn't sure, but I definitely didn't have this praise of oh, look at you. Look, you have that I thought I was cool because I had a 6-pack, but I wasn't getting all this high praise from the people around me. Not really, no.
Okay, fine. Just because I'd say that's probably in the minority in comparison to what most people get. Mm-hmm. And as you say, you had a very normal/abnormal childhood where food and dieting wasn't the center stage in the way that it was for most people. So I think that's probably would have made it easier in some ways. And I'm not saying easy, but would have helped that you hadn't been getting all of this congratulation from all of these external sources and then thought, how am I going to have to deal with this?
Right. I didn't feel like there was anyone I had to explain myself to when I started recovering, started eating normally, started working out less, and started, regaining any weight that I had lost from restricting or anything like that. Yeah, I just felt like I could do what I needed to do for my own health without needing to make up explanations, excuses, or explain it to everyone else.
Okay. And in one of your articles where you were talking about your eating disorder, you said, I thought that just maybe I could shame myself into submission, but the self-loathe and the anger didn't have their desired effect. And this is something I really see happening a lot with clients. And this is almost regardless of where someone sits on the disordered eating spectrum. This crazy belief that if there's this continued hate and this self-loathing, that somehow at some point this will magically transform into body love and compassion through some miracle, or through them becoming smaller. And I'm guessing this is something that you work on and chat with a lot about with clients.
Yeah. I actually just did an interview where I was talking about some of the keys to healing your relationship with food and body. Well, first of all, some of the hidden blocks to healing that relationship, and then some of the keys. And my very first one was motivation from a place of hate just never works. It absolutely doesn't work. And it doesn't work because we don't take care of the things we hate. If we think about it, I can't think of one thing I hate that I take really good care of and spend a lot of time nurturing. And I know, if I hate something, I'm done with it. I'm throwing it away. And that's what happens with our bodies, where we start growing and tending to these ideas of hating it and of disliking it, and we think we can quote unquote fix it by just beating it into the ground, pummeling it into submission, telling it how awful and unworthy it is, and somehow on the other side we're going to get what we think we've always wanted in our in our fitness, in our form, in our thinness. And it's just not the case, because what I've known in my own experience is that to truly develop a loving relationship with your body is the starting point, to start working on acceptance, to start working on looking at your body like a gift and nurturing that relationship together. I often compare it to nurturing a romantic relationship. And that, from out of that place, is where you really start feeding it in a way that helps it feel and function best. You really start moving it and resting it and tending to it in a way where you're going to feel absolutely awesome. But it's not because you've hated yourself into feeling awesome. That doesn't work. It's because you've loved yourself long enough to stop, admire, listen, observe, and then make the choices that are going to benefit you and your body.
Yeah. And I would totally agree with that. And I think people have it very backwards. And the thing is, as you probably experienced when you went down the cycle that you did, if you don't love yourself and don't feel comfortable in your body at the heavier weight, you don't suddenly have this realization of being in that thinner weight and feeling really confident and good within your own skin. It just, in a lot of ways, gets worse. There's more social isolation. There's more worry around keeping up your behaviors and keeping things hidden, and all of this that then doesn't deliver this promised land that people think it's going to deliver for them.
Exactly.
And so at what point in the journey did you then decide that you wanted to start working and helping women? So I know you said that there was a decision at some point, but how long after you'd been working with someone did that be okay, I'm going to actually do this?
Well, it's interesting. Before I actually went and got help or anything like that, I was in a leadership position in a church.
Okay.
And I spent a lot of time mentoring women in that capacity. So I had already been a mentor, been someone who worked with women in particularly. And I knew that I was good at that. And I knew that it was something that I enjoyed in that realm. And so I was as I was going through all of this, I thought, I know I could be really good at this. I know I'm a great non-judgmental sort of person. Yeah. I offer good advice, but I also listen really well. I'm intuitive, so I see what's going on in between. I read between the lines. I hear what people aren't saying, and I'm able to pull that out of them. And so I thought, man, this is exactly, my coach and I are very similar. We're good friends to this day. You actually interviewed her before.
Okay.
It's Jamie Mendel.
Okay.
So,
yes.
So she was my coach.
Okay.
And we're very similar in terms of our personality. She's a friend of mine now, but I was like, man, I could do this. I really think I could. And so that's what motivated me and sparked the idea. And I talked about it with my husband, and I said, of course, I'd want to get certified. And that's kind of where it went. So I was already, I don't know, I would say 7-8 months into recovery before I was really okay, this is something I want to continue to pursue. Let's see what happens. Then I got certified and opened my practice and went on from there.
Okay. And obviously going through your own eating issues, you learn a lot, but people are obviously different, and what they experience can be totally different to what you struggle with. And were there things as part of the eating psychology course that were totally new to you, or you hadn't really thought about or come across before?
There were some things I think that were new for me. I really enjoyed, though, the parts that I spent a lot of time with, obviously, were the parts that most resonated with me. So I most enjoyed the conversations around binge eating and why there's binge eating, around restriction and why we choose to restrict, around the fact that from that education, there was always a lot of talk about food and body not really being the main issue and digging deeper. And so I appreciated that. And there was definitely a lot of things that I'm so glad that I got the certification training. I was able to sit and to study and to learn that way. There's some things I don't often use in my practice. I'm not one who's really very interested in helping people with digestive issues, unless your digestive issues are because you're restricting or binging all the time, you know, but things like that, or elimination diets and stuff, that's just not where my passion lies. And so it's not something that I ran with in the course, but I learned about things like that too there. So I was appreciative just to have a well-rounded education. And if I do have clients who bring those things up, I'm able to speak into it a bit or refer them on to someone else who is more qualified than me or more passionate about it than me. But yeah, it was a great education.
Okay, cool. And in terms of, I mean, you mentioned about the binge eating side of things, there's a lot of that focusing also on the physiological side of like the driver in terms of if you restrict, you are going to binge. It's got nothing to do with you being weak. It's got to do with pure physiology.
Yeah, there was a lot of conversation, which I think is great for your listeners and something I share with all of my clients, just for everyone to hear, is that when we either restrict or when we are self-judging, even while we're eating, so we're putting the food in our mouth, we're eating the cake, but we're like, this is so bad, this is going to go straight to my hips, whatever those thoughts are that we're thinking about that food is actually creating a physiological stress response in our bodies, which is going to slow digestion. It's not going to help you absorb nutrients as quickly or as readily as if you did it in a relaxed state. If you just ate the cake sitting down, taking deep breaths and really enjoying it,
Yeah.
And so I liked learning about the physical responses, about the stress response, and how big of a factor that is in the way we metabolize food and the way that we respond to food on a physical level. And, stressing about food is probably going to cause you more binges and probably even, slow your metabolism and have you hold on to fat more, things like that, than if you just relaxed around food and ate what you wanted from a place of acceptance and joy and celebration.
Yeah, which I find people can understand intellectually, but when you are in the midst of all that, it becomes then very difficult to like loosen the reins somewhat, which is why people then get trapped into those like the binge deprived cycles, because probably the way that you experienced it after a binge is like, okay, now I need to really make amends. So like I'm going to be even more restrictive, and it then just becomes more and more likely that the same pattern is going to repeat again and again. And if you are consistently telling yourself it's because I just need to get more control, like it's like a problem within me and my strength and all that, the more that then continues on. So yeah, whenever I'm talking about this stuff with clients, it's like it's not you, it's not because you're weak, it's like just your body trying to do its utmost to keep you alive and to get calories and nutrients in that you desperately need.
Yeah, for sure. And I was just talking to a client last night who's like, I'm horrible, I'm a failure, I hadn't binged in 3 weeks and now I've binged for 3 straight days. She was kind of like, are you mad at me, without saying it. And I'm like, oh man, like I think you're awesome. I could care less. Like I could care less if you binge. What I care about is how are you responding to yourself after the binge? Are you showing yourself compassion? Are you taking a minute once you can? Because, we like to advise people like stop, think about what you need while you're shoving your face. But anyone who's binged knows that doesn't usually happen, at least not at first when you're trying to recover from binge eating. It's hard to stop and think about what you actually really need or what's really going on in your heart and mind when you're like halfway through the tub of peanut butter. So I'm fine, like go ahead and binge. But afterwards, what I always loved hearing from my clients is that they were gracious and compassionate with themselves, that they could think about it, that they could move on, not move on from a place of like, I'll be better now, but move on from a place of like, that happened. There was a reason that happened. What can I learn from it? Make the next right choice for me. And I really appreciate that part of it. Like, but there is this sense, whether you are the binge eater or you're working with binge eaters, where they feel like they have failed you and failed themselves if they've engaged in a binge. But binges are part of the territory of healing. Like they're par for the course when it comes to overcoming your disordered eating. You're going to binge, especially as you're healing, because there's just this aspect of wanting to hold on to it. It feels safe. It's the way that you've dealt with comforting yourself. It's the way that you've dealt with uncomfortable emotions like we talked about, or numbing. Yeah. And we know, honestly, we know how to get mad at ourselves for binging. We know how to get frustrated. We know how to deal with the emotions related to restricting and binge eating. So it is much easier to do those things and concentrate on like, oh, I binged again. Oh man, like this is awful. Than deal with the other stuff that's really going on in our lives. We're really just trying to avoid it with something that's familiar and safe.
Yeah. And it is interesting you say about like clients be like scared or worried that I'm going to get them into trouble, or you're going to get them into trouble. And that is a very common thing where it's like they almost feel like they failed me or they failed you as part of this. I'm like, it's got nothing to do with any of that stuff. As you say, let's be compassionate. Let's look at this situation and like talk about it very honestly, what's going on.
Yeah.
And so before you were doing the coaching of women, before you had kids, like, did you have a career before that? And if so, what were you doing?
I was a certified public accountant.
Okay.
If you can believe it. I didn't have all my tattoos or anything like that, but I was a CPA.
Okay. Wow. That is not what I would have expected. Is there anything that skills that you learned as part of that have been even transferable at all?
It's funny. The reason I went into public accounting when I was in college is because I am a very artsy person.
Okay.
I always loved ceramics and photography and painting and drawing, writing and poetry. Those are the things that make me come alive. And call it the rebellious side of me, whatever. I never wanted to go to school and have someone else tell me how to do those things.
Okay.
So for me, it was super practical. I'm like, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to do something that is like very clear cut. There's a right way and a wrong way to balance financial statements. So I'm just going to do that and keep all of the stuff that was really sacred and special to me as my own, keep it held closely. So that's what I did. I liked the people side of public accounting. I also worked a lot in low-income housing. And so obviously, again, being somebody who just loves advocating for the marginalized and seeking justice, working in low-income housing accounting and doing audits for low-income housing communities was something that I liked, I enjoyed, but I can't say that I use very many of the tools that I was taught with accounting now.
Okay. And I see on your website as well, you volunteer for a charity called Girls on the Run. What is this charity about, and how do you help them out? What do you do with them?
Oh yeah, Girls on the Run is awesome. It's a nonprofit. It's national here in the United States, and basically what they do is they teach young girls, elementary age girls, and I was a coach last year.
Okay.
So I got to be firsthand teaching these young girls empowerment, self-empowerment, confidence, pride in themselves, and just the idea that they can do and be anyone that they want to be, like the sky's the limit. It's kind of taking off any of those limitations or limiting beliefs or mindsets that they would have that are marketed and messaged to them all the time. And we actually teach that through running. So by the end of the season, all of these girls run a 5K. And we say you can run, walk, skip, hop, jump, crawl. You don't have to run it in any speed.
Yep.
But it's really about empowering them to show them that they can do hard things and that they, through the power of their mind and community with the other girls, they can achieve really awesome feats. And so we teach them, we coach them after school, and then we have a huge community 5K. A lot of people come out for it, and we run with them and cheer them on. And it's amazing.
Wow. I mean, that sounds really, really incredible. How did you get involved with that?
I've always wanted to do it. It's something that's pretty big in the community here where I live. And I thought, wow, that seems really fun. That's exciting. And I had a daughter. Well, I still have a daughter, but last year was the first year that she could sign up for Girls on the Run. You have to be in third grade.
Okay.
And so she was in third grade last year and she wanted to do it. And I was like, sure, well, then I'm going to get into this. I'm going to coach. This is the perfect time and opportunity. And of course, I see a need for young women to just be encouraged and to be empowered from a place that has nothing to do with the way that they look or the way that they eat, but what they're capable of and what their dreams are and who they are as people.
Cool. I think, that's amazing. And if you can be touching and reaching girls at that age when they're then really impressionable and getting the right messages into them, I think is really important because I think too often like girls are praised for being pretty or looking cute or that kind of thing, and there's not enough encouragement for them doing lots of other things and challenging what they can be about where it has nothing to do with their body and nothing to do with how they look. So I think that's a really, really good thing.
Yeah, it was tons of fun. I mean, and you always have really interesting conversations because they're coming from elementary school. There's a weigh-in at elementary school. So once a year here in America, I don't know if it's the same where you are, but in public school, these kids are weighed and then they get a grade sent home. Not really a grade, but, where they fall a percentile on the range of body weight. And so a lot of these girls they'd be coming to see us, the coaches, and have practice after this. And it would be all the buzz, talking about weight. So we got to have really good conversations about weight and size with them. And we also got to have conversations about health. We did an activity where we talked about healthy mindsets and if you could tell if somebody was healthy or not by looking at them. And it was really neat to hear what they had to say, but also to be able to speak into them.
Okay. And they were then okay with your message in terms of health at every size or your message around body positivity? And the reason I'm asking is I know not everyone is on board with that. And if there is like weigh-ins and BMI, then it might be a more tough sell. So yeah, how was the experience?
Okay, so honestly, they're third and fourth graders, and we're really cool adults with tattoos, and So anyway, so it was kind of like whatever I said, they're going to be like, "Yeah, Coach Lou, like that's right." But I think that we really did have a good conversation, and we weren't saying anything obviously that was going to be like, "Well, you shouldn't have gotten weighed," or I think my daughter was the only person whose parent wrote in, obviously saying, "You're not going to weigh my child," But we didn't have conversations like shoulds or shouldn'ts or black and whites. We just like to open up the dialogue, to ask questions, to have them sort of explore. Can you tell by looking at someone if they're healthy or not? Can you tell by weighing someone if they're healthy or not? And kind of see what they thought and what direction the conversation led in their way. So it was really about opening up the dialogue instead of pushing down our opinions. We did share them, but as a contribution to the whole.
Okay. And at that age, were you already seeing girls with lots of insecurities and issues around their body, or they were too young for that to have really started to take hold?
No, there's definitely a handful of girls who had insecurity about their bodies, about their weight after this situation, about health and what the implications were for what clothing size they wore and what that meant about their health, and what nutrients or what calories were in their snack, things like that. There were those kind of conversations that we had to field for sure.
Okay. You also did a recent post. It was actually a video that you put on your website called the Eye Candy Diet, which I thought was really interesting, quite funny. Do you want to describe this diet for people? Because I know you probably don't recommend diets, but this, I think you said, was the only one that you would recommend.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think I did that. I did that maybe in December of 2015 or something. And I essentially, with the eye candy diet, is just putting in front of your face, in front of your eyes, things that are going to uplift you and bring a healthy mindset and encouragement and inspiration to you. So it's one of those, a lot of us as coaches, we talk about and recommend regulating your social media streams, looking at those feeds and getting rid of the stuff that makes you feel like crap, that makes you feel not enough, insufficient, incapable, unacceptable. So removing those things is the removal part of the eye candy diet. And then adding in body positive voices, activists, health at every size, social media feeds, just encouraging, inspiring women who are doing amazing things in the world. And I always advise my clients, as do so many of us, to start looking at and following really stylish, fun people who are their size or bigger, who they admire and who are joyful and happy and experiencing the life that they think they want, the life that my clients think they want on the other side of skinny. There's people experiencing it right now all along the weight spectrum. And so just putting that in front of your face and every day realizing that the life and the joy and the fun that you get to have here in this very fleeting moment that you're here on earth has nothing to do with your weight. Your weight is really inconsequential to that. And so yes, the eye candy diet is just about getting out the nasty stuff that makes you feel like crap and putting in really positive, inspiring influences, and especially in your social media feeds, but in what you read and what you see and what you watch on TV as well.
Yeah. And this is something I talked about recently in a podcast where there's been some really good research done on what we see on a day-to-day basis has a real direct impact on what we think people should weigh. And they did some research where they showed women, girls of all different sizes, and they had to rate what they thought of those different sizes to like work out what their baseline is. And then as part of the manipulation part of the experiment, they would show them like either lots of heavier women or lots of thinner women. And basically whichever direction they took it, if you saw more of the thinner, you would have more of a preference for that, and your liking would go down to thinner and thinner women, and vice versa. So I think a lot of the feelings around body image, and when we look at other people and we look at advertising and how we feel in relation to that, is based on that environment and the impact that those images has, as opposed to these things are set in stone and this is just our preference.
Right. Yeah. And these are the sort of studies and these are the sort of ideas that we're not just talking about weight here. This affects the way that we look at certain races, the way that we look at gender. There's a lot of things where the more of what we see and the messaging that is incorporated in what we see then leads to a preference that we, that's almost basically subconscious. It's not like we're choosing to make these preferences, to choose one thing over another. It's not an active choice, and yet subconsciously what we've been taught and what the messaging is all around us truly does influence the way that we view life.
Yeah. I was listening to an Andrea Owen podcast recently where she was talking about racism and just how systemic that is and just how built into the structure it is. And yes, there's a lot of people who are doing that very inherently, but for a lot of people it's just because of the very nature of how things have been set up over the hundreds of years that we find ourselves in a position where a lot of these issues are now there. And so, yeah, I think it is very interesting of what you see and how much that has an impact on you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my son is Black. I have an adopted son. And so we run into that side of things often too, in terms of race and cultural messaging and media messaging and the way that society views Black men in particular.
Yep.
And what we're up against, so to speak, raising him and the different things that we have to teach him. My white husband has to teach our Black son that he can't, for instance, wear a hoodie into a convenience store. Not something a white man has to think about.
Yep.
But as a Black man, you do. And so I say that just to kind of bring up this idea that I think sometimes we forget, or we don't even realize or recognize how much what we see in advertisements, what we see in commercials and on television and on our social media feeds. And the great thing about the social media feeds is we get to pick what we see there.
Definitely.
So that's where we get to have some control. We get to be empowered around what we see. I mean, really, we can be empowered everywhere because you can turn the TV off, you can throw away the magazine. You don't have to take in all of the messaging that we're bombarded with every day. But we have to at least admit that those things are affecting the way that we view self and body and others.
Yeah. And I think the fact is, if you curate that news feeds and that information in the right way, it can be then very positive. It can help you to change your views, beliefs, opinions about lots of things without you noticing it even so much. Like the same way as it changes your opinions on a day-to-day basis without you being conscious of it. So I think people should be conscious to set those things up, and then they can almost forget about them and they will see how much of a difference it starts to make.
For sure.
So look, I'm really conscious of time, and I know that you have to head off to pick up some kids from some school.
Right.
But look, this has been an amazing chat. Before you go, where can people find out more information about you? And I'm going to put everything in the show notes. But if you want to just explain the links or web or for social, and if you also have any upcoming events or books or courses that you want to promote, feel free to do so.
Okay, sure. Well, you can find me at lueats.com. That's where you can find basically everything. All my social media handles are on there too, but it's lueats.com. And like Chris said, it'll be in the notes. My Instagram, where I spend a lot of my time, is spelled out lueats.com. So that's at lueatsdotcom. And I'm there a lot. I like to interact with my followers a lot there. I am currently offering a free 5-day course called Finding Freedom, which is all about making peace with food in your body so you can get on with your life. And you can go to my website. You'll see the bar where you can sign up for that course. And it's self-paced. It's email and also video training. So you'll see my face and hear my voice kind of explaining some practical steps to the lessons that I'll send you via email. I do have a few openings, just 3 openings left. Right now I'm taking clients for my unrestricted mentorship program, which is 6 months of one-on-one coaching, and you can find out all about that on the website as well. That's really the best place to find me. Look at the free gifts. You can look at my favorites. Chris is on there. I think you're the first podcast I have listed on there. But yeah, so that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm up to. I'm always around, pretty accessible. So send me an email via my website or get in touch one way or another, and I'll be happy to chat with anyone who's listening.
Perfect. Well, look, Lou, thank you so much for coming on the show. Like, I really do love your sane and very authentic approach with all of this stuff. And I really encourage people to check out Lou's blog and to check out the content that she's got, because it is very, very good. So thank you again.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for listening to Real Health Radio. If you are interested in more details, you can find them at the 7 Health website. That's www.7health.com.